Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the 2019 reorganization meeting for the Lacey Township Board of Education. I ask you to please join me in saluting our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Adequate notice of the reorganization meeting was forwarded to the Asbury Park Press and the Beacon on January 11, 2018, and revision advertised in the Beacon on March 15, 2018. And by posting the notices in the Forked River and Lenoka Harbor post offices, and by filing a copy of the notice with the Lacey Township Clerk as required by the Open Public Meetings Law. At this time, I would like to swear in to office our new board members. I would first like to invite Mr. Frank Horvath and any family members he might want to have come up to take the oath of office. Hold this one. Okay, great. Here is your oath. Just read it into the camera, into the microphone. If you put your right hand, lay left hand on the Bible, raise your right hand, I'll hold this for you. Let's read.
I, Frank Horvath, do solemnly affirm that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of New Jersey, and I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same and the governments established in the United States and this state under the authority of the people, so help me God. I, Frank Horvath, do solemnly affirm that I possess the qualifications prescribed by law for the office of member of the Board of Education, and I will faithfully, impartially, and justly perform all the duties of that office according to the best of my abilities, so help me God.
Congratulations. Welcome to the Board of Education. I'm going to ask you, so if you could just sign this for me, please. And then you can take your seat at the dais. Yes, sir. If you want to have your family take a photo right now, I'd be happy to let you do it. This is the time. You sure? No, I'll leave it. Okay, right. You want any special pose? You good with this? All right. 1, 2, 3. I'll take it out. All right. Congratulations. Thank you. Please take your seat. This time I'd like to invite Mrs. DeSenza, please, and her family. Hold that. All right, here's yours. All right, raise your right hand, put your left hand on the Bible,
Yes.
and read what you see.
Thank you. I, Regina DeSenza, do solemnly affirm that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of New Jersey, and that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same and the governments established in the United States and in this state under the authority of the people, so help me God. I, Regina DeSenza, do solemnly affirm that I possess the qualifications prescribed by law for the office of member of Board of Education, and that I will faithfully, impartially, and justly perform all the duties of that office according to the best of my ability. So help me God.
Welcome back. So if you wouldn't mind just signing this for me, please. All right, same thing if family wants to come up and take a few photos, get in a few photos, I'll be happy to do the photography for you. Stand together. Come on, come on. Next, I would like to call the official roll of the newly comprised Board of Education for this school district. Just respond, please, by here or not. Mr. Horvath? Here. Mrs. DeSenza?
Here.
Mr. Riggs? Here. Mr. DeBlas? Mrs. Downing? Here. Mr. Morandi? Mr. Giordano? Here. We have a quorum. At this time, I would like to call for nominations for the office of Board President. When all of the nominations have been made, a member of the board will move to close the nominations, and the Board President will be elected by a roll call vote by voice. I ask any nominations for
Yes.
the office of President.
Yes, I would like to nominate Sean Giordano for president. He has patiently waited 3 years to become board president. Sean, tonight's your night.
Thank you. Are there any other nominations? So at this time, I would like to a voice vote for election of Mr. Giordano as board president.
Do we want to have a motion to close the floor?
Would you like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to close the floor.
Floor is closed, so don't anybody get on it. Mr. Horvath?
Yes.
Mrs. DeSenza?
Yes.
Mr. Riggs? Yes. Mrs. Downing?
Absolutely.
Mr. Giordano?
Yes.
Thank you. Congratulations. At this time, I'm going to turn happily the meeting over to newly elected board president, Mr. Giordano.
That was easy.
Okay, at this time, I'd like to open the floor for nomination for vice president.
I'll make a nomination for Nick Morandi as vice president, and Nick is aware that we are nominating him tonight.
Any other nominations?
Close the floor, not motion to close the floor.
I'll second that. Roll call.
Absolutely. Mr. Horvath?
Yes.
Mrs. DeSenza?
Yes.
Mr. Riggs?
Yes.
Mrs. Downing?
Yes.
Mr. Giordano?
Yes.
Congratulations, Mr. Morandi. At this time, I would like to call forward Kathleen Asher, an attorney from the New Jersey School Boards Association, who will deliver the annually required school ethics training to our members of the board. Please.
Thank you very much for having me. Congratulations to the new members and returning member. But I do appreciate the opportunity to be here from New Jersey School Boards, and I hope you will find the information useful. Okay, this is, as Mr. DeGeorge told you, this is ethics for school officials. This is essentially your training for this year, and we offer many other opportunities, but this is going to be your first, and for others, repeated training, just a very broad training on the responsibilities under the Code of Ethics for school board members. Just to begin with, to be reminded, and you're all here, so you're obviously not at a point where you're in any conflict at this point, but a board member may be disqualified from service if they have any contract with or a claim against the board. At this point, you do not, but at some point, if that should ever be the case, that will be a point to speak with perhaps your board attorney and to get more information via the School Ethics Commission should that ever become an issue down the pike. As you know, board member qualifications, you all have them right now because you are here, but things can change as well, just something to keep in mind. As you know, the qualifications involve being a citizen, a resident of your district, the ability to read and write, being registered to vote, not being disqualified as a voter. But some things do change, so things such as a lack of residency, election to your governing board, or becoming mayor of the municipality, that can conflict you out of being a board member thereafter. Additionally, attendance issues under the law, the board has the right to disqualify someone from being a board member, and this is discretionary, but if they miss 3 meetings in a row and without just cause. Also, disqualification crimes under the criminal history background laws would also disqualify you. The main gist of my discussion today is going to be the School Ethics Act. I believe soon after this you will have to pass this as a resolution, which is standard under the law. But just some of the things to keep in mind are the requirements for board members under the School Ethics Act involve personal, relative, and financial statements, which you will all have to file. If you're a returning member, you probably have filed this every year. Hopefully you have. New board members will have to file these every year as well within 30 days of taking office today. You will be bound by the Code of Ethics prohibited conduct under the New Jersey School Ethics Act. These are actual laws. They're couched as a code, which makes it sound like it's a maybe more at the school level, but it's actually under the New Jersey school law under 18A is your Code of Ethics and prohibited conduct, which is what's going to bind you in your daily activities as a school board member. Remember that the School Ethics Commission, which is a separate, it's not the New Jersey School Boards Association. We are here to give you information and direction and to lead you to school ethics decisions, give you any information that you need, but the actual enforcement agency for school ethics issues, including if you filing charges as well as advisory opinions, which they offer, which is very helpful, and we'll get into a little bit in a minute. But all of those are enforced by the School Ethics Commission, which falls under the Department of Education. They're the ones that receive the complaints, investigate the complaints, can give advisory opinions, hopefully before things get to that point, and then would ultimately enforce any type of sanction that would come down under a school ethics complaint. Additionally, the School Ethics Act also covers annual ethics discussions and the signed statement that you'll be getting today. Like I said, training, filing, failure to attend training throughout the year that's offered by New Jersey school boards and is enabled under the school law statute, or late training can, first of all, lead to ethics issues, ethics complaints. And they are, I can tell you from what we've been seeing coming out of the Ethics Commission, they have been taking the training really seriously. They are enforcing it. They have been hearing all of those cases in pretty quick succession and ultimately suspending those school board members that do not do the training in the time that they are given. They will work with people, they will work with board members that just can't get quite to the training, to all of it. But if it seems that a board member is not doing everything and fulfilling everything that they're supposed to be fulfilling, they have been sanctioning, they can fine, and they have been following up on this. Just some understanding of the statutory provisions under the School Ethics Act. It requires training. Ethics complaint falls under school ethics. SEC sanctions, which I talked about for a second, but those can be anything from a private reprimand to removal in ultimate egregious examples, and hopefully they do that on a very limited basis, but they have been really keeping up on conflicted issues and things like that. Advisory opinions, the School Ethics Commission offers a really, really useful tool, and a lot of agencies don't offer this, but they will, given a set of circumstances, by a school board, it has to be a school board official. A citizen cannot ask for an advisory opinion from SEC, but they can, given a set of circumstances, and they hear from both sides, they will offer, based on the facts that they are given, an advisory opinion about whether or not a certain conflict exists going forward. Not something that you did in the past, but something prospective, something going forward. They will make an opinion based if they think there is a conflict. And then you're getting it from the horse's mouth. You're actually getting that piece of paper saying, yes, you're fine, there's no conflict, but you did the right thing by asking, or no, you really shouldn't be doing it. It's not a disciplinary issue, it's more of a, you got that piece of paper that says there is no conflict or there is a conflict. So it is a really useful tool and really something that a lot of districts are taking advantage of at this point. Okay, conflicts of interest, that's always a very interesting topic, and certainly something I can't cover in 20 minutes, but I can give you some information, and New Jersey School Board is always here as a tool. There's contact information that I'll give you at the end, and it's in your, on your PowerPoint presentations, because certainly you can't cover it. And there's been a lot of information coming out of the School Ethics Commission that has been interesting lately, so we're just going to give you a real brief update. But any questions at any point, if you want to reach out to us, that's what we're there for, to give you more information and these updates. Okay, the big issues that are usually come in where you have conflicts are either some sort of familial relation or some sort of business or financial relationship. Just starting first with family relations, you may not participate in any way as a board member if you have a family member who works in the district and could benefit from the collective bargaining agreement. Okay, so we're just right now talking about collective negotiations. So if you as a board member have a family member who works in the same district and could benefit from the agreement, so if you're married to, if a board member is married to a teacher and you're looking to negotiate the teacher's contract, that's where the issue comes in. Kind of relational conflicts. Conflicts of interest exist in various relations, and the list every day is getting longer out of School Ethics Commission. Immediate family members, they're the easy ones. They're the sister, wife, husband, siblings, a student that or a child that lives in your house and is financially still bound to you. Those are the easy ones. But then they've gone on to discuss relatives and others, which is a big catch-all that has been expanding to a great degree. Okay, like I said, immediate family members are easy. They're parents, siblings, spouse, dependent child of a school official residing in the same household. Okay, so that one's pretty easy. There's also relative in the case law under the School Ethics Commission. A relative, and this, I'm not going to read it to you, but it has been expanding, and it now includes in-laws, stepchild, stepbrothers, sisters, civil union partners, spouses, domestic partners, everything under the law that would be also considered adoptive children, anything under the law that recognizes someone in that capacity. And it's anyone by blood, marriage, or adoption. So that's all covered under there. That's under the term of relative, which is distinguished from immediate family. This all comes back to the main definition under the School Ethics Commission, which comes under the law. Essentially, this is kind of your credo as you go through. No school official shall use or attempt to use his official position to secure unwarranted privileges, advantages, or employment for himself, members of his immediate family, or others. Okay, others is where the tricky part starts coming in. Who is an other? The school ethics has been kind of trickling out one at a time what they consider other. Started out as mother, father-in-law. Now it's first cousin. There's been 2 cases where first cousin was considered an other person. A cohabitant, someone that lives in the same house and would benefit from perhaps the salary or would reap some kind of benefit from a board member that represents someone in the collective negotiations, that represents the board in collective negotiations. Can also be ex-spouse. Okay, even though you're ex-spouse and you've broken that legal covenant that existed, it can still, if your ex-spouse is still working in the district, you are still, the board member could still be considered either gaining by the results of the collective bargaining agreement, the insurance premiums, the salaries, or they may, the other way, they may decide, it may look as if there's some sort of conflict, as if you could be doing something not so beneficial for that person, okay? Who is not an other? First cousins-in-law once removed. Yes, that was actually a case. So yes, it's understandable that you will need to ask questions if you have questions about relatives. Cousins-in-law and second cousins are still to be, are still in question. We haven't quite gotten to second cousins yet, but we know cousins-in-law and first cousins-in-law once removed are not considered others. when you see these on the slides that say 82515, A is for advisory opinion. So these are actual advisory opinions that come out from school ethics, and they give advice as to the best that we can do to follow. So A2515 came out in 2015. It involves others where they clarified it, and it actually is a good case. But participation in all union matters and all aspects of collective negotiations process, including voting on the collective bargaining agreement, and that's the series of cases that came out of that, all prohibit a board member from participating in collective negotiation in those relationships. And we broke it down a little bit further, case by case, but where it was determined that these brothers-in-law, father-in-law, first cousin, a niece, daughter, aunt, spouse's uncle, those sorts of things are all considered others under the case law and may potentially have cause you to have a conflict down the way. Collective bargaining negotiations is the big issue, along with usually all the case law usually comes down to bargaining and collective negotiations, and or whether or not you can participate in superintendent evaluations or searches or interviews or evaluations. So right now we're doing in-district conflicts under the law, under the 18A:12-24C, which is the main statute you will see throughout your reading of this, direct or indirect financial or personal involvement that could impair one's judgment. Now, it doesn't mean that you actually are impairing judgment, but there can be that appearance of impropriety. So the School Ethics Commission takes that into account of things that would not look appropriate or could be misconstrued by the public and could have an interest in causing people to lose confidence in the board. That's kind of where they're coming from. An advisory opinion dating all the way back to '93, it's still good law, however. Board members with immediate family or others who are members of the same statewide union, although not the local bargaining unit at issue, are conflicted in order to avoid the impression that public trust is being violated, to avoid actual and apparent conflicts, and increased money in the local district could be used by the employing district. That's the kind of thing that they are looking for. And that would prohibit people, board members with their immediate family, who is a member of the same statewide union, from being conflicted out of those negotiations. Out-of-district prohibitions. It's also an issue potentially if the board member has a relative who is a member of the same statewide union but in another district. Okay, not in the same district but in another district. You cannot participate in any aspect of negotiations. Okay, this is where it gets a little dicey, but you can ratify the contract after the memorandum of agreement is attained. So you can't participate in any kind of the negotiations, but once you have that piece of paper that has all the outlines and all the initials, after all the negotiations have taken place, that school board member, as long as that relative is out of the district, they can ratify the contract. They can ultimately vote on it. And I know it's a little sticky and probably will need more, but that's what the School Ethics Commission came out with. And we were all kind of shocked by that, but that is something they came out. They're trying to give the board members the most ability to participate as they can. And while it may appear, it might be a conflict to be actually in the negotiations, they didn't want to essentially take away that power from a board member once the negotiations are done. Another conflict that comes up is also if a school board member has a relative that is out of district that happens to be a little more involved in the union than just a regular member. So if we were talking about the teachers union, the local education association, and that maybe that board member has a relative who is a shop steward or an actual officer in the union. That can be a little more conflicting, and that would be something that you probably would have to review with your board attorney and with the School Ethics Commission, because you just don't want to, it's very fact specific, but that is an issue that does pop up from time to time, that the board member's relative is not just a member of the union, but is actually has some kind of higher level responsibility in that union. Okay, this piece of paper is probably the best thing I can give you during this presentation. It is a chart that actually came out of a case in School Ethics Commission advisory opinion in 2017, And it gave a really nice, because they know how difficult this can be to get, and they really want people to get it right, not make this a disciplinary issue, but just people really to know what they can do and not do when they're serving on the board. But it is a really nice encapsulation of potential conflicts and what a board member can and cannot do. Again, it's very fact-specific, but this kind of gives you a good idea. Just reading, I'll just take one example of a relationship. I'm reading 3 down where it says spouse that has so it's a board member whose spouse is a member of the same statewide union. They can't negotiate, and as I just said, yes, they can ratify the memorandum of agreement, so they can still vote on the contract, and they can also vote on superintendent issues, on personnel-related issues to the superintendent. So this is just something to keep that's helpful. It kind of helps people get their head around all the different rules. I'm not saying this isn't going to change, because school ethics likes to change, keep things, make us all earn our living. But this is a good piece of paper just to keep in case these kind of issues. At least gives you a starting point where to start looking if there's potential for conflicts. Remember that if you ultimately have a series of conflicts that may keep the board from being able to vote on a particular issue because of a series of relative conflicts or a series of business conflicts, the doctrine of necessity still is out there, and that's what's going to let the board still vote on something and make sure that they're still able to do their job. However, there's a lot of requirements about it. It's not to be taken lightly. It's not to be used lightly. And you do have to, while you're not seeking the School Ethics Commission's permission, you do have to notify them that you're doing it, and you do have to notify the public that you're going to be doing it. So you're essentially voting members that have conflicts are essentially asking for permission to now vote on something where they wouldn't ordinarily have a quorum to do so on something that's very important. And it's only on things that are voted for. It's not just things that come down the pike where something is just talked about, but it is where there's an actual vote. So just very quickly, where there's a quorum of the board in conflict and there's a pressing public need for action, essentially a vote, no alternative forum which can grant relief, so there's no other way to conduct the business that you need to do, and the body is unable to act without the conflicted members taking part. The board has to state publicly that it's invoking the doctrine, so you have to read it as a resolution. You have to speak to the reason for doing so you would have to put on the record that, and read out how each member has a conflict and just the very basic nature of that conflict. And the board will then read that resolution at a regularly scheduled meeting, post the notice for 30 days wherever the board usually posts their notices, and then provide SEC, School Ethics Commission, with a copy. Again, there's some the law's a little attenuated on whether or not you are asking the School Ethics Commission for permission at that point. They will call you up and tell you if they think you've done something incorrectly, invoking it, or if you're not properly invoking it. But it's just you're giving them a copy and they'll let you know if there's something wrong, but you're technically not seeking their permission, since there's no legal requirement that you do so. So generally the areas that you would be concerned about would be voting on collective bargaining, participating on negotiation teams, superintendent searches, and superintendent evaluations. Some districts go along and they're just fine. There's no conflicts in these areas. Other districts, particularly the smaller ones, there just happens to be a lot of relations and in the smaller towns, and they do end up finding themselves in these positions sometimes where they have to invoke the doctrine of necessity. It's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with it. You just have to follow all the rules and then you can go about your business. One other thing that's been coming up a lot under SEC is the union endorsements. There's some cases on where board members either have been given a union endorsement for a position. There's even a case that came out where the board member did not want and actually refused the union endorsement, but got it, and essentially got it. The union went ahead and did it anyway, which could restrict the board members' some of their actions. The general rule that came out of that is if the union endorsed a candidacy, you will, as a board member, have to abstain from collective bargaining for a year. And in that case, it was even though when the person was questioned about the fact that she essentially did not want the union she had not requested it, she didn't accept any money, she didn't solicit it, and not that she didn't want it, but she just had not solicited it and was not looking for it. I think they made it a 6-month where she couldn't participate in the collective negotiations for that reason. But they still did say that, you need to keep your distance for a little while, and then you can participate after, in that case, 6 months. And generally, the rule is after a year, you can participate in collective bargaining after you've received a union endorsement. Volunteering is also an issue that school ethics has been getting a lot of questions about, and has also come out with several decisions on. We get a lot of questions about volunteering and what a board member can do or not do in the volunteer capacity within the district. There is not a general prohibition against volunteering as if you are a board member and then volunteering in the school. However, there are a lot of caveats, and it is something that should be discussed if these kind of issues come up. In general, a school board member should not, if they're volunteering, should not serve any kind of a leadership capacity in that volunteering. Okay, they should not be telling other staff members what to do. They should not be telling students what to do. In sort of a boss-employee relationship, they should not be doing that if they are also a Board of Education member, but they can certainly volunteer. They should not be subject to widespread direction from staff, board members, or students, so it shouldn't go the other way either. It shouldn't be, a lot of times we get questions about extracurricular activities, school plays, things like that. Should board members be volunteering? If it's just a matter of someone painting sets and helping out that way, that's fine, but to the point where it would really be someone giving or getting direction from a board member, essentially the board member should not be directing the play, should not be picking who's getting what parts, that sort of thing. The board member should not have general oversight of staff or students, and should have no executive functions permitted. In general, like I said, no general ban. Infrequent, non-executive, in-district volunteers are not inherently contradictory to board member duties. Some examples that have been okayed are, reading to classes, reading books, chaperoning class trips. Anything you would do as a parent is generally fine, that you're not doing any differently than you would as a parent, but you're doing it, you also happen to be a board member. One thing to always remember is you're not giving up any of your parental rights or your rights with your students, with your children, but anything you would be doing that would be because you're a board member should probably be avoided or at least discussed. Generally, volunteer activities outside organizations are fine, self-governing, wholly independent of the board members. Things like parent-teacher organizations are generally have been okayed by School Ethics Commission, except where there might be an actual conflict where the Board of Education is actually voting on something, maybe in conjunction or voting on something that has to do with that parent-teacher organization. But otherwise, it's not a per se violation. Going to the issue of superintendent, supervisor, and principal interactions when there's potentially a conflict, board members may not participate in the hiring of a new superintendent, supervisor, or principal if the board member has immediate family, relative, or other who is an employee in the district and who would be directly or indirectly supervised by the new hire. Okay, so that's essentially everybody. Pretty much everybody in the district would ultimately report to the superintendent or a supervisor or a principal. So if that board member has an immediate family, relative, or other member in the district, that member should definitely stay away from having to do with searching for the superintendent. Board members may not participate in the hiring, also others. Board members with nieces, spouses, uncles, full-time employees, sons, full-time students, part-time summer substitutes, that was actually a real case, as relatives or others. They may not participate in any matter involving the relative's employment or supervision, including the employment matters with superintendent or supervising administrators. Okay, that one they came out pretty clear with. But if any of those conflicts exist, that board member should probably stay out of the actual search for the superintendent. Interview committees, we get a lot of questions about interview committees as well. Participation generally from the things we have learned from School Ethics Commission is that participation should be limited. And these advisory opinions that came out, they're several years old now, but they're still good. Board members' participation in an exit interview would violate the Code of Ethics. They really don't want school board members participating in exit interviews. No more than 2 board members should participate in an interview committee when it's established by the superintendent and coordinated by a member of the administrative staff. So they should really limit, boards should limit board members in interview committees, except where it is the superintendent at issue. And also, board members are not encouraged to interview positions other than the superintendent. They really ask you to stay away from it unless you have a real good, you really feel the need to, and then it should be limited to no more than 2 board members. A couple new cases that have come out. Lowell versus Smallwood, the district. Board member visited a superintendent candidate without the board consent to discuss employment. This was considered quite a bad thing. Board discussed potential meeting with candidates but failed to reach any kind of consensus. And there was an adverse inference taken from that action. And most recently, an interesting case called Percy versus Waska. This was a case where a board member unilaterally issued a Rice notice, essentially saying that they were going to speak about the superintendent at the next meeting. But the board member unilaterally, it was not the board president, it was a board member, issued this Rice notice to the interim superintendent and then asked for a vote to happen at the next meeting. A little background on that one is that the board was essentially brand new, and that board member actually rallied enough votes to, at that point, fire the interim superintendent at that point, just because of the perfect storm of it being brand new members and that sort of thing. So this case went to the appellate division, got a lot of attention, but essentially it was determined, and they were very clear in the appellate division, that this board member had no authority to discuss personal matters with board members elect, especially because they were brand new members, and he was talking to them prior to them taking the oath, and actions were beyond the scope of his duties, and his actions were also subjected the board to litigation, because then, as you can probably imagine, the interim superintendent had some issues with losing her job the way she did. Okay. I think that's my time. This is our contact information, and our website, as well as the Department of Education website, has a lot of good information on it. But please feel free to give any of us a call at New Jersey School Boards if you have questions. You just want to get some ideas where to find things. Again, we're not the enforcing agency. We can't give you some, really direct case-specific advice, but we're all there. We all take turns having, it's called the Attorney of the Day program, so there is someone on the telephone every day that can answer any information and lead you to the right area. If you have any questions, I'll entertain them. If not, feel free to give us a call at any point. We're always there, and I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Asher, appreciate that. Mr. Giordano, before we call for votes on the resolution, do you mind if I just provide a little bit of elaboration on just a couple? Number one, as Ms. Asher alluded to in her presentation, Code of Ethics a big deal for board members and for Dr. Clark and myself. And each of us will have to certify in writing that he or she has read and agrees to abide by said code. If every board member has that in front of them this evening, if you could sign it and drop it off to me before we leave this evening, that'd be wonderful. In addition, our board has decided to incorporate a questionnaire designed by our labor attorney who, in help identifying any conflicts that Ms. Asher kind of referred to. So those, I would say, please take them home, give them some thought, and drop them off to me as you were able. Combined statement of results, the election results for the entire county, they're on file in my office if you ever can't sleep at night and you want to come get a copy of those. I'm very happy to provide that. We are going to try as best we can to live by parliamentary procedures and an organized and orderly board meeting. Our board policies and regulations are on our board policies are on our website. I encourage you, if you haven't done so, to take a look at those. Our meeting schedule is the final resolution that we will be asking for votes on this evening. And that's all I have, Mr. Giordano.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Item number 4 under I. I've requested revision to policy 0155.
Yeah, that's coming.
Okay, so
Yep.
just approve this the way it's
Yep,
written right
absolutely,
now?
yes, I would, yep.
And then we'll work on
yep.
it later. Okay.
Yes,
Thank
ma'am.
you.
And you'll get that probably at the January meeting
Thank
for
you.
first read. So roll call vote, Mr. Horvath?
Yes.
Mrs. DeSenza?
Yes.
Mr. Riggs? Mrs. Downing? Mr. Giordano? Thank you.
At this time, I'd like to announce the appointments for the following committees. The Finance and Operations Committee will be chaired by Nick Morandi. Sean Giordano and myself will sit on that committee. Mr. Dean DeSenza will sit on that committee. Sorry. And Linda Downing will be the alternate to that committee. The Policy Committee. Rob Riggs will be the chairperson of that committee. Frank Horvath will be on that committee. Tom DeBlas will be on that committee. Linda Downing will be the alternate. The Curriculum Committee. Linda Downing will serve as chairperson. I will sit on that committee. Regina DeSenza will sit on that committee. Rob Riggs will serve as the alternate. You're welcome. For delegates and alternates for New Jersey School Boards Association, delegate will be Rob Riggs. Alternate will be Regina DeSenza. And for the Ocean County School Boards Association, delegate will be Regina DeSenza, and the alternate will be Frank Horvath.
Thank you.
At this time, I'd like to open the floor to public comment.
Tony Rizzoli, Sunrise Beach. First, congratulations to the new committee members. I'm glad to see you stepped up to the plate and grabbed the bull by the horns. I have an issue, first, with the entire board, and it has to do with transparency. I forwarded a message requesting from a sitting board member in email form and written form for an opinion on a matter that I thought might be contentious. As requested in the past by every board member other than Mr. Horvath, who hasn't been there, any contentious matters being brought to this podium were requested to be brought in advance, at least give a heads up to the sitting board. So following that request, I did that. And I picked this particular board member to send the email to because of his specific background. I wanted his personal opinion in reference to it. I received no answer. I was kind of upset over that fact, so I wrote a second email. And in the second email, I requested, again, an opinion. And if he was unable to respond, then I requested that he pass it on to administration, and the administration get back to me with an opinion, or at least address the matter that I had a concern about before I came to this mic. No response. Now, before this meeting, speaking to our superintendent, I found out that, in fact, the email was found in her spam. Now, I used the email information that's on the website to contact the board member. It's right there. I do not understand why any taxpayer or any member of the public using the specific email instructed by the board in the website would go to spam. That's number one. I think you must have some kind of an IT problem, or the person in charge of your IT information is somewhat unscrupulous and doesn't want the taxpayer to give information for it. I don't know which it is.
So let me just comment on that, Mr. Rizzoli. I didn't say it was definitely in spam. I said I was going to look into it to find out if that's where it ended up.
Well, the only other reason would be that the person chose not to respond specifically to my request. And as a board member and a taxpayer, and 66% of my tax money going to this organization, I think I have a right to know. And so I have a transparency issue. I want to know where my money's going, and I want to know how it's being spent. And if a request is made, I expect a response. And if no response comes, I feel disrespected. Now, you know I'm up here a lot. I don't feel I disrespect you. If I bring an issue, I bring a solution. I don't expect to be disrespected by not being responded to. I would like to know what happened, but I'm going to bring forward the information anyway. My concerns were, and some of it has to do with my background, military pay for our subordinates. All those people who were in red shirts are subordinates. And I say subordinates, the administration is also subordinates to the taxpayer. The people who are elected here are the people who make the decisions on where the money goes. You tell the administration yes or no, they tell the teachers. It's a chain of commands, the way it works. So, never having sitting in on any of the negotiations that were done with our labor unions and our subordinates, I thought I would find out what the opinion would be of this particular board member. It seems that when I look at the agendas, and I read the agendas, I bring them up here when I talk to you all the time, sometimes it says that a military leave is with pay, and sometimes it says a military leave is without pay. Why? Is there a difference? If a person is serving our country in a capacity that's official, and they have official orders to report for service as a military person, why are you making a discrimination between the two, that some get paid and some don't? Now, you're not under any obligation to pay at all. Under the, Uniform Control Act, all you have to do is make sure that there is a job waiting for them after their military service, unless the job is eliminated. And if the job is eliminated, you don't have to give them the job back. But if the job is not eliminated, you have to supply them with the job. Many private companies, of which I've been involved in my entire HR career in the past, have always made a person who has official orders whole, meaning that their military pay, after seeing the official orders, and their pay that they would receive from the company that they work for would be melded to make the person at least get a full paycheck for the amount of time they serve. Now, you don't have to do that under the law. And I didn't see anywhere tonight where anybody was named to any negotiation team, because we just went through the negotiations. I did read the contracts. I do see some difference in the military service language, and I think it should be corrected before the next contract when proposals are made. And whoever gets on that committee, I think, should take it into mind. But a couple of things to keep in mind in reference to making people whole and spending our tax dollars. When a person goes away to military service and you're going to pay them, that's our tax dollars. You're going to replace them with a substitute, that's our tax dollars. They're getting paid by the federal government for their service while they're there. That's our tax dollars. That's 3 times tax dollars are being spent for one performance of one job. Understand that when you go to make a decision. And what I'm basically asking is parity. You shouldn't make a discriminatory decision between who's going to Afghanistan, who's going to be worried about his legs being blown off while he's serving and protecting me and you, and some guy who's going to go play the flute in a band because he's only gone overnight or a day or two. Military service is military service. So consider that when you go to make decisions in the future in reference to this. And the other thing I want you to consider, and the reason I say it is because, well, take Mr. Riggs. I'd like to set you apart. He's an individual who owns his own business. He goes away to military service. Nobody's paying his salary. He don't work for a big company. This is a big company when you think about it, okay? He goes away, he's doing his patriotic duty which is all volunteer. A person volunteers to be patriotic, to go away and do military service and protect you and us. So I'm not saying you have to pay them or you don't have to pay them. What I am asking you to do is be consistent in what you do. Either pay them or don't pay them. Not because he plays the flute and he's the guy who's worried about IEDs and is going away for 6 months and putting his life on the line. Make the decision. I don't know how the taxpayers feel. Personally, I wouldn't pay the guy playing the flute, but I sure would pay the guy who's worried about IEDs and got a weapon in his hand protecting me. But you can't make that distinction, is what I'm telling you, or what I'm asking of you, but consider it in the future. And please, transparency, folks. Transparency. If a taxpayer asks you a question, make sure you answer it. By all means, if you've got a problem with your IT system, or you need to change your emails, then do so. I don't want to come up here and be disrespectful again. If I have to, I will. Go ahead.
So I have a comment. I've been in IT for 30 years, okay? I deal in email both internationally and in North America. And oftentimes things get put into a spam folder based on content, specific words that are used, titles and emails, et cetera. My advice to you and to anybody else that has an issue, when you don't get a response, and you should, email shouldn't be ignored, you should get a response, but in this case, something may have happened. The next course of action is to pick up the phone and call the central office. Pick up the phone and call the board office and address your concerns, and they certainly will be heard in an expeditious manner. Sometimes emails do fall through the cracks, but you know, your comments were heard, and we appreciate them, so thank you.
In reference to that, I don't deal with people too much on the phone because I don't know what they're doing on their end. I'll come here and I'll address you here, person to person, me to you. There's no barriers. Otherwise, I want it in writing. And that's my position. Next issue.
I want to jump in. So I don't think I was the one who got the email, but if I did get the email, I'll tell you and I'll tell everybody else out there, I'm probably not going to write back to you. But what I will do is I'll relay it up the line. Me as a single board member over here, I'm not comfortable in any way stepping out of line and, answering questions that I'm not 100% sure of. A lot of things have come to my attention. I've always handed them right up the line. That being said, I'm going to continue to do so, but do not expect any emails back from me. I'm pretty frugal in that department. I think I've written 6 emails or 7 emails since I started, and 4 of them had to do with fingerprinting. 2 of them were about buffalo wings. That's about it.
That's fine. And I did make that request that if the individual who I wrote to was not comfortable to pass it on. And I also wrote to the superintendent that I did pass it on. Okay? And because I did pass it on in email form, had my email, could have responded in writing. Okay, next issue. Last year there was a contentious meeting of which a couple of hundred people showed up and talked about how some students were supposedly, their rights were affected negatively because of, they were shown in what was considered a negative picture. At that meeting, there was a lot of back and forth as to what could be done and shouldn't be done. I got up and I made a suggestion that we should arm the teachers. And at that point, I said it, not out of jest, I mean it. I mean, I mean to say that biometric weaponry and being able to have a weapon that is owned by the district and is administered by a armorer who now could be the resource officer, because we have one in every school, and is issued at the beginning of the day and the end of the day, and nobody else could use the weapon except who it's issued to, after training and everything else, is not completely out of line. This is a local newspaper from Broward County, South Florida, which is the county that the Parkland School, okay, and the headline said the most preventable school shooting is dated December 13th. And the byline, or the under headline is, teachers need guns, schools need security. Panel concludes. This panel was made up of state police FBI, school administrators, sheriff's departments from all over the state of Florida, their Attorney General's office, the Broward County Sheriff, police officers, a vast selection in cross-section of everybody down here who lost children and teachers. And they came to the conclusion teachers should be armed. I'm going to leave this for you to read, just as a matter of information. Something else, I don't care what the teachers' union in New Jersey says, because they're just political hacks, in my opinion. But those teachers had courage, and I think our teachers will have courage. What the union tells them to do, I think they should ignore and go with their hearts. But that's beside the point, and everybody has their own personal opinion. Next thing on my list here is, and I held this off for 2 years because the board president and one of the sitting members was in fact very involved with football. And they knew my position in reference to football, and I wouldn't bring up the subject and go into an argument as to whether sports, academic or scholastic sports, really have any right at all in our school system when we're looking for money and we can't afford to have teachers and we can't afford to have the things we need to reading, writing, and arithmetic, and we can't pay for those things. But $250,000 was raised for lights for an athletic field here at the high school. I just don't understand why there was $250,000 raised for lights. 66% of our tax money goes to the school anyway, the entire district. And for $250,000, from what I understand, is what it's going to cost to get the Chromebooks that we need through the Lacey Education Foundation. Just funny that the amount of money seems to be the same, but we can pay for it for lights for a football field in kids that aren't going anywhere with the football industry, okay? And we can't pay it for Chromebooks where every one of the kids who could use it are going to probably benefit from that for the rest of their lives. And it's not only big, strong, fast boys. It's all students.
So I just have a question.
Sure.
I'm not sure I'm following. Are you implying that it's your belief that the $250,000 that was raised for the football lights is
It didn't come out of your budget, no. It was raised.
I'm not sure I understand.
It's just that I don't understand how people would even consider it for lights rather than Chromebooks. We're here to educate students. We're not here to put them in helmets or give them a ball to run around with. We're here to make them so that they can go on with the rest of their lives in a good manner and support themselves. Seems like our best leave our town. We need them to stay. And I also brought up a subject in the past, of which the superintendent addressed, about the park test. And you said we've changed the name. Well, yesterday it was reported that there was an appeal that was lost. And now we don't have park tests or the new name of it. And again, I ask you, how do we measure performance? How do we measure that the tax dollars that were being spent would get better bang for our bucks if the tests are not going to be in place, whether it's a park test or a new test?
So is that
Where is our measurement?
Is that a question?
Yeah.
So when I did the October student achievement presentation, I talked about multiple measures. I talked about the NWEA. I talked about teacher-developed assessments. I talked about the DRA. When I talked about the park, the one thing that I will say, thank you, over and over again, is that that is one snapshot. And very often it's a snapshot of 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. And while that's an accountability measure that is administered by the State Department of Education, we rely on our own assessments to determine how well or not well our students are doing. And for that, we rely heavily on the measures of academic performance through the NWEA. In fact, we're administering that test Kindergarten, first, second, third, all the way through ninth grade. It's an excellent test. We've been administering it for many years. And that is a local decision. We decide whether or not we're going to administer that test. And we decided, I'm going to say we're probably in our 7th year, maybe even more, administering the NWEA, and we will continue. And that's one of many. So while the PARCC test is important to a lot of people, it's not the end-all be-all for us. But I can say this, the most recent results that we have on the PARCC data is that we are doing pretty well in terms of growth, and that's an important word. Because we can't compare apples to oranges. We have to be comparing oranges to oranges, and that means we're looking at growth. So are our students growing from grade to grade? Based on our most recent results, yes, they are. Not in all areas, but in many. So when you talk about the news that's out there about PARCC, I anticipate that that news is going to continue. We have new administration. We have a new commissioner of education. And it's my anticipation that that test is going to change. Its name is going to change over and over again. But, and this is just my opinion, the state will never take a step back and give that control over to school districts completely and say, you're on your own, there will be no accountability or an assessment to measure that accountability with. So I'm not surprised by any of the media that's out there about the PARCC test. We knew that that was going to happen.
I was just, again, concerned that here we are again, the taxpayers saying what little measurements of our teachers in our school district's performance, there's another little chip of it that may not be available to us to view. You do report yearly, and I'm here when you report it, and I do see it on Channel 21, and these are all good things that I compliment you on. But don't cut back at all on any kind of a reporting where the justification of the tax dollar to the taxpayer and what money is being spent here is spent wisely, and we do show improvement. And that's basically all I'm concerned about, that we get more bang for our buck, our students are better for it, and our society and our region is better for it because we're producing better future employees for all the industry that we have that is in this area. Again, I wish all the new members a bunch of luck. You're going to need it.
Thank you for your comments. Any additional comments?
Thank you.
Good to see you. My name is Ron Martin. I live at 44 Dunbury Drive, Forked River, part of the Seabreeze community. First of all, Sean, congratulations on assuming the presidency. I have Tums and aspirin. I'll give to you later.
Thank you.
Mr. Horvath, congratulations to you also. And Regina, for sure, coming back a second time. So that's great. I congratulate you. And I wish the board a great 2019. The reason I'm up here is that there was a lot of work done by an ancillary group, if you will, of you, and that was in the creation of a 501c3, and that effort has been completed, and there is a 501c3, purpose of which is to ensure that the students who excel are constantly motivated to continue to excel, and those that need help get that additional help. However, it requires a great deal of parental participation. Without that participation, the 501 will die. The efforts that are required to raise the funds from major corporations, and we have a group sitting in the back that do just that, and we have several group members of the 501 who tediously put it together. I congratulate you on that. Requires parental participation. When we started the effort, myself, Matt, Paul, my wife, and others, we said that in order for this to be successful, you would need $1 million in the kitty. and eyes went, wow, $1 million, where are you going to get $1 million? There are many corporations that will give you 10, 20, maybe 100. There are other organizations that will give new products, Chromebooks, other things that are helpful. However, the task is a very arduous one. Someone has to develop the marketing program. Someone has to contact these corporations. Someone has to bird dog the effort. And that, in my opinion, requires parental support. It is for the benefit of all children in the district. It is educational funding above and beyond what the school district provides. So I would really encourage every parent to participate. And as a figure of attainment, I would suggest that a minimum of 50 parents get behind this 501 and work the effort. Our little group will still stand in the background and make suggestions and recommendations to help the 501 personnel. But the burden lies on the community. So I would encourage that. And I would also like to point out that the effort was an extremely arduous one. There's so doggone much paperwork to process to get the certifications, to make the next step, that I congratulate Regina and her group who have worked long and hard to get it. So my recommendation to the parents, come on aboard. It's a great ship to ride. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Martin.
Any additional comments? Seeing none, before I move to board comment, before I close the floor, move to board comment, I'll pass it over to Dr. Clark, superintendent comment.
Thank you, President Giordano.
Thank you.
So welcome, everybody. I'm glad that you were able to come out today. Happy New Year. Let me start by saying that. Can't believe I'm saying Happy New Year 2019. But I'll keep my comments brief, but I did want to congratulate you, Mr. Horvath, and you, Mrs. DeSenza. I look forward to, with the entire board, in working with you to accomplish great things. Looking forward to your participation and collaboration in committee meetings, and I wish you all the best.
Absolutely.
All right.
Thank you.
And congratulations also to Mr. Giordano, who's going to be serving in the role as board president. And even though Mr. Morandi is not here, congratulations to him in his new role as board vice president. So I know that we will continue to collaborate and accomplish great things.
Thank you. All right, at this time, I'll move on to board comments. I'll start with a familiar face down in the end, Mr. Riggs.
Guys, I really don't got anything. Happy New Year is all I wanted to say to everybody. And welcome back, Regina. I can't believe you'd actually want to do this again with Frank. Sean, looking forward to you at the helm, and Nick right behind you. And that's it. All right, guys, I don't know. See you soon.
Mrs. Downing?
Same thing, I just want to congratulate and welcome Mr. Horvath, and congratulations on your return, Mrs. DeSenza. Sean, good luck. If you ever need anything, I'm here. I know you'll do a great job. I think you're nuts, but you'll do a great job. And to Nick, too, I think you two will be a great pair, and I'm looking forward to a great year, so thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
And Happy New Year, everyone.
Down the end, Mrs. DeSenza.
Thank you, Mr. Giordano. Thank you very much for the requested appointments to the Finance and Curriculum Committees as state alternate and county delegate, and I will be happy to be the extra alternate to anyone on policy if 3 are not available on any given night. Thank you also to the voters for returning me to the board. Once again, I ask the public at large to please consider coming to meetings, learning about the board, and to consider becoming a future candidate. I will be happy to coach anyone who wants to learn what is entailed to sit on this board. Mr. Horvath is very enthusiastic about his service, and I welcome him to the team. On January 11th, he will be attending the new board member weekend orientation in Princeton by the New Jersey School Board Association. It's a great program. And I have some important news to share. I will be going to Washington, D.C. think for the first time in the history of the district, a board member from Lacey will be attending a National School Board Association Advocacy Institute Conference in Washington, D.C. at the end of this month. I offered to reimburse the district for the cost of this conference and have given a check for $695 to cover my conference registration. I will also be paying for my own accommodations and transportation to Washington because I feel it is a worthwhile investment. On Tuesday, January 29th, conference attendees will be meeting on Capitol Hill with congressional representatives. I am supposed to have a one-on-one meeting with new Representative Andy Kim. Topics are school funding, specifically IDEA funding, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. Everyone knows that in order to provide free, appropriate public education, some students require additional funding to meet their educational needs. Congress needs to reauthorize IDEA funding and increase it. The state and local taxpayers are bearing far too much burden. This past December, I was able to attend the Mill Pond Holiday Choir and Band Concert at the high school. It was well attended, and the musical selections were well done. I'd also like to thank Dr. Clark and Mr. DeGeorge for our local new board member orientation that we had on December 12th. And a reminder to Lacey alumni and parents, please sign up at laceyalumni.org to follow the district and learn about Lacey alumni in the news and connect with old friends. Alumni are also welcome to volunteer with the new Lacey Education Foundation. There is a link to a letter with information about the foundation posted on the alumni website. And we are going to have a volunteer meeting on January 31st, and that information is posted on www.lacyeducationfoundation.org. And I have a few requests of the district. I need an appointment for a new ID badge for building access, and I would like a set of business cards as soon as possible to take to Washington. And I also need a meeting with Dr. Clark to discuss the questions assigned by the Advocacy Conference. I also need to know when my New Jersey School Board Association account will be reopened, and my school email box as well. Thank you to all in attendance. Your presence here tonight is very much appreciated. Please come back to the first business meeting of the year on Tuesday, January 22nd at 7 p.m. due to the Martin Luther King holiday that Monday. And thank you very, very much for being here tonight.
Thank you, Ms. DeSenza. Mr. Horvath.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. First of all, I'd like to thank everybody who voted for me. I will work very hard to try to make sure that I earn that faith that you put in me. I'd also like to thank my former running mate, Amanda Buron, for her support and her endorsement, and of course, my wife and my family for their support during the campaign. I'm truly humbled and honored to have a chance to serve the students of this district and the taxpayers of our town, and I look forward to working with the other members of the board. And I'd like to also thank Mr. DeGeorge and Dr. Clark for the board member orientation. I think that was a big help because you're coming in, you really don't know what's going on. And thank you.
Great, thank you, Mr. Horvath. Now I got to get used to trying to keep my comments short because usually everybody says everything else I want to say. But first, I'll congratulate Frank or Mr. Horvath. Welcome, and welcome back, Ms. DeSenza. We appreciate your service up here, and I'm looking forward to working with you as well as the other board members. I also want to congratulate Mr. Morandi on his appointment to Vice President. A couple of things. When I ran for Board of Education 5+, 6+ years ago, I ran under, one of the items was transparency. So, I believe in, the open dissemination of information where it makes sense. And I know that every board member that sits up here believes in transparency and shares, wants to share all the information that they can with you. So it's important to me. And when you do have questions and concerns and comments, obviously coming out here is one thing. We see the attendance at these meetings not so great. I would encourage people to come out and join us at these meetings if they have topics that they wish to discuss. Also, to call the central office if they have topics that they wish to discuss. And send emails, and hopefully they won't get caught in spam. I do know that when it comes to school security, prior boards and this board take security very seriously. It is something that we continuously work on with our local law enforcement agency. I know Dr. Clark is in constant communication with Chief DeBella, and I feel that we have a great relationship between the school district and the chief of police. And whenever there's new initiatives, like the one that Mr. Rizzoli brought forward to us, we'll absolutely take a look at those and see if they make sense for the district. Keep in mind, we now have SROs in every school, right? And we also are looking at building vestibules for the entryways to every school. So we, as a board, take security extremely seriously. The lights. I look at someone who has a passion for something and then starts an initiative to fundraise. And I think that that individual, part of the foundation, you talked about bird dogging and running an initiative and how important it is. And I think that individual did a tremendous job raising $250,000. I also think a challenge was brought forth tonight to be part of the Education Foundation, which Ms. DeSenza, Ms. McAvoy, others have worked tirelessly to put into effect. I think it's critically important that all the parents in this community, all the businesses in this community, come together and fundraise for things that you have passion for, whether or not it's Chromebooks, whether or not it's educational supplies, materials that are going to benefit students. Get involved and be part of that. Just because somebody fundraised for lights because they were passionate about it doesn't mean that we can't fundraise for other things that are important to this district and the students in this district. So I would encourage people to get involved with the Educational Foundation and support that effort. It's a great thing that we've been able to create here in Lacey. I think that is all that I have tonight. I want to wish everybody a Happy New Year, and with that, I will close board comments and make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Motion to adjourn. Thank you and good night.
Oh, all in favor? Sorry, I was a little...
Aye.
I won't hit it again until next time.